Unlike the Sonic 2 bonus video, this is not an unfulfilled obligation. I never actually promised to make a Sonic 3 bonus video, and if you had asked me in 2017 if I was going to make one, I probably would have said no, because unlike Sonic 2, there aren't a ton of cool public betas for me to sink my teeth into. That actually changed while I was gone. A really cool Sonic 3 beta was dumped and uploaded online in November 2019, so even though obviously I'm a little late to the party, I figured it still would be fun to talk about. There are a ton of videos out there going super in-depth on why Sonic 3 and Knuckles is such a fun and cool game in the first place, as well as videos discussing specific elements like Michael Jackson's involvement in the creation of the game's music. Sonic 3 being one of the most widely talked about video games is actually a good thing from my perspective, because now I can focus on really diving into the minutiae of the game and talking about details nobody cares about except me. That said, there is one little issue. Because I was pretty sure I didn't want to make a Sonic 3 bonus video, I kind of cannibalized some potential talking points I had for it and inserted them into my Sonic 3 complete video. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to blow your mind with the knowledge that Flying Battery Zone was originally going to be between Carnival Night and Ice Cap. Same with the special 100,000 point time bonus you get for finishing a level at exactly 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Although I'm happy to inform you this stupid ass feature actually made its way into Mania. And speaking of my Sonic 3 complete video, I suppose it's time we talk about the elephant in the room. The new best way to play Sonic 3. Sonic 3 Angel Island Revisited. Now I stand by everything I said in my Sonic 3 complete video. It has such a wide array of customizable options that'll never be truly obsolete or anything. But as I stated in that video, if there ever were to be a widescreen 60 FPS version of Sonic 3, I would probably consider that to be the new definitive version, and, well, now we have that version. Those cowards at SEGA refused to make it, so once again the fans had to step up to the plate. And when I say fans, I'm specifically referring to Eukaryote, the absolute lad and chad behind Sonic 3 Air. I could do an entire video just gushing about this version of the game, but for the sake of this video, I'll keep it short and just strongly recommend checking it out. It's got so many cool and customizable features of its own. It even features some absolutely fantastic unlockable extras like the drop dash from Sonic Mania. Seriously, Sonic 3 Air is awesome. Here's the obligatory part of the video where I mentioned that while it's fun hearing some dipshit YouTuber regurgitate information directly in your ear holes, you know what else is fun? Doing your own research into your favorite games. I couldn't have made this video without the Cutting Room Floor, Sonic Retro, Hidden Palace, and the Sonic 3 Unlocked blog. If you enjoy this video, I'd strongly recommend poking around those sites and seeing what else you can discover about this game, as well as gaining a better technical understanding behind some of the shit I'm about to discuss. As is tradition, let's begin with the level select and debug mode. Unlike the previous two games and Sonic 3 alone, you don't have to input a button combination on the title screen or enter a code into the sound test. You literally have to go into Angel Island Zone and find one of these swinging objects and grab onto it. Then while you're holding it, press left, right, up, and you'll hear a ring chime. Now on the title screen you can scroll down to the sound test option, which is actually also the level select option. For debug mode it's a similar story. Go into Mushroom Hill Zone and find one of these weird metal pulleys, then input the same code as before. Debug is very similar to how it was in the previous two games, although now there's a dedicated button to flipping the gravity like in Death Egg Zone, which is kinda neat, although most ceilings really aren't meant to be walked on. There's also some less well-known features of debug mode, like if you hold B and C it'll cycle through all the animation frames of the current character, which looks pretty funny. In Sonic 2 or 3 alone, after enabling debug mode, hold C while selecting a level. This activates what fans have called night mode, where everything except certain objects are much darker. This was actually a feature used by the devs for checking information about certain layers and planes. They removed this feature in Sonic 3 and Knuckles because I guess they just figured it's not particularly useful as a cheat code. There are two very interesting objects only in Sonic 3 alone's debug that can be found in the first part of Angel Island. The first is this strange surfboard-looking animation. It's actually the remnants of a cut intro that was going to be used instead of the one with the tornado. Here's a restored version of basically how it was supposed to look. The second very peculiar object you can place is this large rotating mess of red orbs. This causes the game to lag and corrupts the color palette. There was a lot of speculation about the purpose of this object, but we'll actually come back to talk about it later. Before we dive into that juicy beta, let's take a look at some of the cut content from the final game. I don't know how I forgot to mention this in the previous bonus videos, but in both Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 you can find an unused black and white death sprite for Sonic. I have no idea what this would have been used for, but there's a similar unused sprite in Sonic 3. And there's even one for Knuckles in Sonic and Knuckles. What were these supposed to be used for? I have no idea. Go write a creepypasta about it or something. Here's an interesting little unused sprite. It's a shadow that gets bigger and smaller. This was actually originally going to be used under the tornado in the opening sequence, but they cut it out for whatever reason. Originally, it seems like there were going to be unique buttons for Knuckles to push in certain zones, rather than just the default button sprite. You can find this one in Angel Island, and this one in Carnival Night. There's also a light bulb item which breaks when submerged underwater. Speaking of Knuckles, he has unused gliding and climbing sprites for the 2-player mode. Also, check out this sick Death Egg hologram sprite. In addition to the regular gumballs, there's also an F-ball and a glowing S-ball. You can actually see part of an S-ball at the back of the gumball machine, but it's not glowing. Presumably the S-ball had something to do with Supersonic. For the slot machine bonus game, there's an unused Supersonic face icon. Here's a neat piece of trivia. Did you know the Supersonic animation in the final game is actually missing a frame? It's meant to be a bit smoother. Here's a comparison so you can see what I'm talking about. This isn't exactly unused, but here's a complete look at the green bomber sprite from Angel Island Act 2. Similarly, here's an unobstructed view of the Angel Island beach, which shows a palm tree shadow which is totally obscured by the foreground elements in the final game. The multiplayer level Azure Lake also has a flower garden which can't be seen in the final game since the level is in the way. Here's something neat. There's actually a forward-facing Robotnik sprite that goes unused in the Flying Battery Zone 2 fight. Speaking of unused Robotnik sprites, there's actually a very interesting unused object in Launch Base Zone 2 located near the Death Egg cutscene files. It's actually a fully functioning, scaling, fleeing Eggman sprite. There's so many neat little details and oddities in this game, like the Knuckles shooing thing in Sky Sanctuary that I already made a whole video on. So it kinda goes without saying, but this isn't a complete list of every single little glitch and Easter egg, just a lot of them that I happen to find interesting. Like, did you ever notice that the levels for the competition mode follow an alphabetical naming scheme? Maybe you did, but as someone who barely ever touched this mode, I thought that was kinda neat. Here's something really fascinating. The colors of the special stages in Sonic 3 actually correspond to the color schemes of the levels in that game. As you can see, the ground and sky colors match up to the corresponding zones. That is, except for Special Stage 5, it seems to be the only one that doesn't follow this pattern. Except, it actually does. It seems to line up with the Flying Battery Zone's color scheme, funny enough. Even more proof that this was the original intended level order. So in Hydrocity Zone, there are these weird little decorative black balls which usually move side to side, but right before the Act 1 boss, you can find these guys which are totally static and don't animate at all. What's up with that? Want to see something weird? In this one very easy to skip part of Hydrocity Zone, you can find a special monitor. Unlike every other ring monitor in the game, this one actually gives you 20 rings instead of 10. Why? Is this the son of Failure Crash? No, it just seems like they accidentally put 2 ring monitors in the same location. Something else I like to do in Hydrocity Zone is have Knuckles climbing on the air. This is super easy to do, just let these rotating platforms push you down when you're on the wall. Here's another weird thing. There are 3 rings placed in the floor under the first black anti-gravity ball in Death Egg Zone. You can see this for yourself by getting a lightning shield and backtracking to this part of the stage. Have you ever wanted to make Lava Reef Zone Act 1 impossible to beat? No? Well, too bad, here's how you do it. First destroy this badnik to open the door, then backtrack to this star post and go into the bonus stage. Once you leave, the wall will be back with no badnik and no way to open it. The only thing you can do at this point is die. Speaking of badniks in Lava Reef, this little rock bastard doesn't actually give you 100 points when he blows up. It says he does, but he doesn't. I mean, I don't really care, it's just points, but I don't like it when the game lies to me. Did you know that in Angel Island Zone Act 2, after this long tube section, there's actually an invisible platform you can land on off screen? If you hold right coming out of the tube and sort of line yourself up with this tree, you can sometimes land on it. Not that there's really much to do up here, but I just thought it was kinda neat. You can even spin dash to get on top of the main level. Here's something kinda weird. You know Knuckles' theme? That short little drum beat loop? Well, at 34 seconds into the Knuckles theme, there's actually a short vocal sample. But the thing is, there's never really a point in the game where you're gonna be listening to the Knuckles theme for 34 seconds. I mean, technically you can do it at this part in Launch Base Zone if you just wait around for long enough. But I always knew about this because you could hear it if you do that thing where you jump off the bridge at the end of Angel Island Act 2. That one was intentional, just almost impossible to hear under normal circumstances. Here's something very peculiar that's definitely the result of a glitch. In Sonic 3 alone, if you wait on the File Select screen for about 47 minutes, one of the instruments gets much louder than it's supposed to. Do you know what the difference is between the Japanese and US versions of Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Well, the more astute viewers might remember that in the Japanese version of Sonic 2, Tails was called Miles, and the same is true for this game. However, there's also one more, almost imperceptible change. The Japanese version drops the trademark symbol since they don't apply in Japan. Now, this tidbit has become much more well known in recent years, but I remember I was shocked when I learned there's actually an 8th special stage in the game data. Well, there's actually a unique 8th special stage in both Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, so there's 2 unused special stages in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You can access them by using a little-known feature of debug mode where you can select the special stage you want to play by setting the sound test to the number stage you want. If these stages seem familiar, it's because they were actually both used in Sonic Mania. So on the level select screen, you can change your playable character by pressing C, and it changes this little number. 00 is for Sonic and Tails, 01 is for Sonic alone, 02 is for Tails, and 03 is for Knuckles. What would happen if you forced the game to load the character in slot 04? Well, using this Pro Action Replay code, we can see there's no character that corresponds to this code, so the game freaks out and loads you into a stage as Blue Knuckles. It's a Knuckles object with Sonic's palette, lives icon, and spawn coordinates. This can lead to some weird shit, and some levels are unbeatable without the help of debug mode. If you're playing Sonic 3 alone, then by pausing when the signpost is spinning at the end of an act, you can catch a glimpse of Blue Knuckles. Despite Sonic fans having a long history of giving palette swap glitches dumb names, it doesn't actually look like Blue Knuckles has a special name. He's just called Blue Knuckles by everyone. Oh, my mistake, he actually does have a name. It's Tails. He looks kinda cool in his super form though. And weirdly, when he reverts back to normal, it fixes his color palette. Speaking of weird things happening with the color palette after reverting from a super form, if you were to revert back to normal Sonic after going super or hyper, then the next time you get 50 rings to transform, Sonic's palette will briefly glitch out. A number of items in the game share the same palette with Sonic and are therefore affected when he goes super. It's most noticeable with the balloons in Carnival Night. Did you notice that the 3 blue pixels on Sonic's emblem on the tornado also share his palette and therefore flash when he's super? Well, now you know. Another weird little thing that hardly anyone will notice is that when you're leaving the slot machine bonus stage as Knuckles, then while the screen is fading out, there are a few brief frames where Knuckles transforms into Red Sonic. How embarrassing. Boy, I sure hope somebody got fired for that blunt. Did you know you can kill Eggman in Launch Base Zone? Remember this part of the stage? Once you land on the platform, you can hit him maybe once before he flies away. But if you're playing as Sonic and Tails, you can use the second controller to have Tails hit him 256 times, and then he'll be defeated. Then if you hit him again, he pops and an animal is freed. Robotnik was secretly a robot the whole time. Deep lore confirmed. Also, pulling off this little glitch makes the level impossible to complete later on, so you have to wait for a time over. You ever wonder what would happen if you beat Super Mecha Sonic as Sonic? Using debug mode, you can take characters into levels they aren't normally able to visit, even though sometimes the graphics glitch out or the level isn't beatable. Well, this is what happens if you use Sonic to beat Knuckles' final boss. Now check out what happens if we do it as Tails. You can also take Knuckles into Sonic's version of Sky Sanctuary for some classic Knuckles and Knuckles action. And if you want to see some really screwy palettes, try beating Doomsday Zone as Knuckles. In Sandopolis Zone Act 1, if you stand on one of these moving spiky pillars with an invincibility monitor, then when it wears off you'll continue standing on it without getting harmed. You can even walk around on it. Something you might already know is that in addition to pushing these blocks regular style, you can actually push them with the spin dash. Nothing that special, except you can actually push them up the sandy slides with this technique, and when you reach the top, you'll switch to the pushing sprite, but in the wrong direction. Great stuff. This is the type of high quality content you're here to see. Let me take a moment to talk about the little animals in the classic Sonic games. In the first game, there were 7 different types of animals that could come out of Badniks. Pocky, Cucky, Pecky, Rocky, Picky, Flicky, and Ricky. Then Sonic 2 added these 5 dudes: Locky, Mickey, Walkie, Talkie, and Becky. But I guess for Sonic 3 they decided to scale it back and they removed these new animals, then redrew the original animal sprites. But for whatever reason they decided to cut the fucking pig from the game. Maybe this happened because he was sort of accidentally cut from Sonic 2 as well. I mean, he's technically in the game data, but the only stage he's programmed to appear in is Death Egg Zone, which has no badniks, so you're literally never gonna see him in the course of regular play. What a poor, pathetic little useless piggy. Literally cut from Sonic 3. How embarrassing. Here's a weird little inconsistency I don't know if you've ever noticed. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, when climbing on a wall, Knuckles reverts to this pose whenever you're not moving. But in Knuckles in Sonic 2, when he stops climbing, he just stays on whatever the most recent animation frame was. Are you one of those people who wishes that Sonic 3 still used his Sonic 2 design? Well, what if I told you that it still does, partially? The animation for using the monkey bars in Flying Battery Zone is clearly using a modified Sonic 2 sprite. It's kind of hard to notice unless you're actually looking for it. But now that you've seen it, you'll never be able to unnotice it. You're welcome. Now let's talk about some interesting glitches that are only found in Sonic 3 alone. You're all aware of the bonus stage, but let me tell you about the legendary Doyless stage. In the Sonic 3 level select, trying to choose the bonus stage option won't work. This is because you need to choose the 6th 2-player versus option to load the bonus stage. But when it's done, it doesn't know where to put you, so it just loads the bonus stage again, but this time the title card is corrupted so it reads Doyless stage, and it just keeps looping forever until you manually quit. And for some reason, this glitches out the level select screen. Absolutely incredible stuff. Here's something super weird. In Sonic 3 Knuckles, walking into the Blastoids in Hydrocity Zone hurts you, as is to be expected. However, in Sonic 3 alone, you can simply walk into them and they'll explode. Here's one that's actually pretty well known. During the Hydrocity mini-boss, it plays the Act 2 boss music for some reason, and if you allow yourself to start drowning, then when you jump out of the water it'll start playing the Sonic and Knuckles mini-boss music instead. So this boss fight can potentially play 2 different songs, neither of which is the correct one. Normally when in super form you don't have access to your shield abilities, but in Sonic 3 if you're super and have the water shield, then holding the jump button when you hit the ground lets you actually bounce. This is a really cool glitch and I wish it wasn't fixed for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. At the end of Marble Garden Zone Act 1, instead of running over and locking the screen for the boss fight, you can actually use the second controller to have Tails go destroy it off screen. Doing this will hard crash the game, so in Sonic 3 and Knuckles they actually fix this little glitch by forcing the camera to pan to the right if this happens. Perhaps one of the most infamous Sonic 3 alone glitches involves Tails in Ice Cap Zone. If you're playing as Tails, then when you reach the first slide area, you'll automatically die. This is because the vertical looping flag is actually set during Sonic's snowboard sequence and Tails skips that part, spawning at the bottom of the mountain. So is the stage unbeatable as Tails? Well, luckily there's an easy workaround. Touching the first checkpoint and dying to respawn the level, or simply entering the special stage and then leaving it will correctly set the looping flag, allowing you to continue. You can actually see this glitch specifically mentioned on page 27 of the US manual, directly above the infamous Diabolical Traps section. In the Ice Cap Zone and throughout the game, avoid having Tails get stuck in passageways or get caught in traps. Have Tails activate Star Post or enter into a special stage as quickly as possible. This one's incredibly specific and also very hard to notice, but I still feel like including it anyways. If your insta-shield animation finishes after you land on the ground, then you won't be able to use it on the next jump for some reason. Alright, finally, now I can get to the part we've all been waiting for. That's right, it's time for the McDonald's Happy Meal toy section. The most memorable moment for me was when he was selected to be a Happy Meal for McDonald's. Yes, it might sound like I'm memeing, but this Happy Meal deal ended up being one of the main reasons the game is split into 2 parts. Naka continues, "When I heard they would be making nearly 200 million units of merchandise for the entire world, I remember feeling both happy and under pressure. Although Sonic 2 was a hit and millions of units sold, we had to complete Sonic 3 before that campaign, and with far greater numbers. As a result, we had to divide Sonic 3 into 2 parts, which we regret. Also, let the record show that according to a Yuji Naka interview from 2004, it's canon that Sonic and his friends eat at McDonald's." So let's take a look at all 5 Sonic toys that you could get with your Happy Meal. Of course you have the main 4 that everybody knows about. Sonic, who comes with a little launcher, a wind-up Robotnik toy, a spinning Knuckles toy, and a flying Tails toy with a little pull string. I always thought it was kind of weird how Knuckles spun around in this cloud like he was a Tasmanian devil or something, but I didn't really care as a kid. I was just happy to have a Knuckles toy. The fifth toy is much less well known, designed specifically for children under 3. The only way you would know about it is by reading the fine print in the commercial or looking very closely at the in-store display. It's simply a yellow ball with Sonic on it. Nothing fancy, but it does technically count as the fifth toy of the set, and because hardly anybody bothered requesting this baby toy, it's by far the rarest. In America, the promotion ran from February 4th to March 3rd of 1994. Towards the end, the Tails toy was actually recalled due to a problem with the pull string. So when the promotion came to Canada, instead of offering a Tails toy, they simply offered a ball with Tails printed on it instead. This isn't quite as rare as the Sonic ball because you didn't have to specifically request it. It actually took a year for these Happy Meal toys to make it across the pond. The promotion ran from January 27th to February 24th in 1995 in the United Kingdom. It took so long they actually dropped the Sonic 3 branding and just marketed them as Sonic toys. On top of that, they actually received a completely different, redesigned Tails toy. Instead of one that flies with a pull string, this one simply spun its tails. Something pretty cool the UK run had were these radical zone-themed Happy Meal boxes. Over here in America, our Happy Meal bags looked like this. Still pretty cool, but the most interesting part is actually it explicitly makes reference to Flying Battery Zone multiple times, which must have seriously confused some kids who actually bothered to fill out their high scores onto this disposable fast food bag. Later still, in June 1995, Japan finally received this Happy Meal promotion, although interestingly they simply cut out the Tails toy altogether. And even more interesting is that the Robotnik toy received a redesign to better match Eggman's design. These Japanese Eggman versions of the toy are very rare and highly sought after among collectors. It's not as well known, but the Sonic toy also received a very slight redesign, mostly noticeable around his eyes. Okay, enough beating around the bush, let's finally talk about the Sonic 3 prototype. This was dumped on November 16th, 2019 as the finale of Hidden Palace's Sonic Month. Once again, every true Sonic fan will get down on their hands and knees and offer their praise to the godly DRX, the absolute fucking hero of the Sonic prototype community, who has blessed us again, this time with the earliest prototype of Sonic 3 to ever be discovered. ROM header data suggests this build is from October, and there are a number of interesting features and changes. Again, this won't be a complete list of every single difference, just a lot of the ones that I found interesting. For the SEGA logo, Sonic.exe runs across the screen and then it cuts to black before the second half of the logo is drawn. The title screen uses an incomplete looking render and is not animated at all. Pressing start takes you directly to the level select, but you can press up, up, down, down, up, up to enable debug mode. Actually, there are two ways to activate debug mode for some reason. You can also do it by playing the tracks 1, 3, 5, and 7. So obviously the most striking part about this beta is that it still uses the Sonic 2 sprite, although he's still missing plenty of unique animations for a lot of the stage-specific gimmicks. When that happens, he'll just continue using whatever his last sprite was. Even the end of act animations are missing, with Sonic just reverting to his hurt pose, which looks pretty funny. There are a few new sprites which look kinda weird, like when Tails is carrying Sonic. Also, the shading on the HUD looks different from the final version. If you wait on the title screen, you can actually view a sort of mangled version of the surfboard intro, which is pretty radical. Interestingly, it seems like they had already decided to scrap this intro. Using some Pro Action replay codes, you can enable an early version of the tornado cutscene instead. And this leads into one of the most noticeable differences in the beta. This fucking Knuckles sprite. Just look at it, he looks so weird, he's drawn in a completely different style. He does this little hand gesture and then runs away at 1,000,000 miles per hour. I mean, honestly, the sprite doesn't look that bad. It's just I'm so used to seeing the regular Knuckles sprite that it just seems weird to me. And if that wasn't strange enough, this intro cutscene is the only part of the beta that uses this sprite. The rest of his appearances all use his final design, so it seems like they decided to move away from this style early on. So there are a number of elements of this beta that are unfinished. When playing the game, you'll notice that there are no giant rings, even though all the hidden spots that are going to be placed are included. Similarly, you can get the stars to appear around a checkpoint if you have enough rings, but no matter how many times you jump, nothing will happen. Elemental shields are in the game, but don't have their special properties yet. They function just like regular shields. The graphics also aren't rendered properly. The invincibility sparkles don't display correctly, rendering as broken game over letters or parts of whatever shield you had most recently. It's hard to put this into words, but the game just feels janky as hell. You kinda need to play it for yourself to really understand what I mean. The collision is worse, like it's much more common to clip into walls than the final game. Similarly, the sound driver isn't finished yet, so sometimes sound effects just bug out and keep playing for way longer than they're supposed to. Also, collecting a 1-up causes the level music to stop. Some sound effects are just wrong, like the spin dash, and a lot of bosses have no audio at all. Honestly, I'll do you a favor and spare you, but if you want to punish your ears, try playing this beta. Let's talk about the other playable character, Tails. You can play as different characters in this build by holding different buttons at the title screen. His flight ability is implemented, but it's still incomplete. For starters, he never gets tired, and his momentum is still a work in progress. He can also fly underwater instead of swimming for some reason, which means he can carry Sonic underwater, which is handy. However, if Tails gets hit while he's carrying you, then you're just stuck floating in the air. Also, AI Tails refuses to enter the water when he's joining you again, like in Sonic 2. Super Sonic still exists in this beta, however, as there's no way to obtain the Chaos Emeralds, the only way you can access him is by using an S monitor placed in debug mode. There's nothing too special about his appearance, it's still just using the Sonic 2 sprites. But I still haven't mentioned the most interesting part yet. Sonic doesn't have his Insta-Shield in this build, he actually has a different ability. This beta of Sonic 3 actually has a drop dash mechanic, the same move that would appear 23 years later in Sonic Mania. Well, it's not exactly the same. Instead of holding the jump button, you need to hold up. And it's a little finicky, it doesn't seem to work on every surface. According to Christian Whitehead, this was just an uncanny coincidence. Well, I guess great minds think alike. And as if that wasn't interesting enough, there are some additional unused abilities in the game data which can be re-enabled using some Pro Action replay codes. The first is an air dash ability which can be activated with this code. This is a pretty fun ability to mess around with, although it's quite similar to the one they ended up using for Hypersonic in the final game. You can tell this is still a work in progress because it's super easy to make the camera totally freak out when using it. The second cut ability is much more interesting and unlike anything in the final game. Using these codes, you can access the ability to fire a ring in the direction Sonic is facing by pressing B in the air. It even causes Sonic to uncurl and fly backwards a bit. The ring will destroy badniks and it even damages bosses. Curiously, you can also use this thrown ring to collect rings too. If you press the C button, you'll actually shoot out 2 rings instead. This move doesn't actually cost any rings, you can even use it while you have 0. It's so weird to use, but it's actually kind of fun once you get the hang of it. The idea of a projectile-based character is really interesting. Alright, let's briefly touch on some of the differences in the levels, starting with Angel Island. So when you load into the level, you start standing in front of this weird-looking Knuckles. I still can't get over how fast he takes off here. Although the funny thing is there's no invisible wall or anything, so you can just walk past him when the level starts if you want, which causes him to glitch out. In fact, you can even walk left and die at the start of the stage, which is awesome. Interestingly, Tails does not spawn with you when the level starts. In fact, early on there's this scripted sequence where Tails flies down and you can jump into his arms and he'll carry you to the upper route. When he reaches his destination, he just sort of floats there in the air, waiting for you to jump down. A bit later on, he'll spawn normally and start following you. As someone who's played Sonic 3 a million times, it's incredibly jarring how the level layout is similar but slightly different. A hidden area near the start is missing, and so is one of the loops before the tree. There are quite a few differences in the layout. A lot of the object placements are totally different too. There's even a Robotnik monitor in the first level. There's also this weird falling log section that's much more extensive than in the final game. Grabbing onto a vine as Tails will crash the game, although in some emulators it just causes severe graphical glitches. The mini-boss even shoots fire during the cutscene early on in the level. A lot of the boss behavior in this beta is not finalized yet. Also, if you jump when the bridge is destroyed like I always do, you still get sent to Hydrocity Zone right away. What a ripoff. The most striking difference in Hydrocity Zone is that the background for Act 1 is totally different with a distinctive layer of green vegetation. Interestingly, this layer of green is still present in the level select icon in the final version. Unlike Angel Island, the level layout is actually the same as the final version, but the object placement is different, which actually changes the level more than you'd think. You can't destroy Blastoids by walking into them in this build, unfortunately. And in fact, when you do kill them, you bounce backwards with great force, which was very disorienting. The mini-boss is using the wrong underwater palette, and there's not an act transition after beating it, meaning you have to quit out and load Act 2 from the level select. It's not actually used in the stage, it's only found in the game data, but there's this weird little version of the Turbo Spiker. Maybe this fly bastard wasn't going to be the only Hydrocity badnik with little baby versions following them around. The start of Act 2 uses a different brick design during the wall chase section, which totally lacks any sort of sound effects. The Knuckles cutscene is extremely janky too, with him just pressing the button and then running through the wall. It's quite silly. Just like Act 1, there's no level transition after the boss. Once you open the capsule, you're stuck and you have to exit out to select the next zone. Like Hydrocity Zone, the level layout for Marble Garden is finalized, but not the object layout. You also start the level running down the slope, not falling like in the final version. In this version, Tails can influence the spinning top, which can be an absolute nightmare. Also, the spinning tops don't despawn after you jump off them, which is really strange. There's also this little spot in Act 2 where you can see under the level. The Act 2 boss is really glitchy, and you just die at the start when the ground is destroyed. It's a huge pain in the ass to try and fight him in this build. So the most obvious difference in Carnival Night is the music. It's actually using the song from the PC version. Before this beta came out, everyone just assumed those tracks were created for the PC release to avoid the Michael Jackson licensing issues, but they were actually the original tracks for the stages. I always thought they kinda sounded like shit on PC, but coming out of a Genesis, they actually sound way better. Take a listen. Still not as good as the final versions, though. Touching one of these spinning things as Tails will crash the game, probably because it's trying to load sprites that don't exist yet. The Act 1 boss arena has no walls, making it extremely easy to kill yourself if you go in at top speed. There's also, once again, no way to get to Act 2 without going back to the level select screen. The underwater palette is incorrect, although it does look kinda cool. Knuckles actually doesn't appear in Act 2 at all, which is weird because you just go through the level normally with no blackout or flooding section. At the end of the act, you just fall down into his area with the teleporter. You have to use Tails or debug mode to actually get up to the boss arena, although there's not even a capsule at the end of this zone. Next up is, of course, Flying Battery Zone. This zone is very rough and incomplete. You need debug mode to really explore these stages at all, otherwise you'll get stuck right at the start of both acts. Act 1 starts indoors with these weird capsules and non-functioning spikes. Oddly enough, these aren't objects, they're actually baked into the level layout. The background is different and it looks a bit like the unused level select icon in the final Sonic 3's data. The entire stage is basically completely empty, lacking almost all objects, although badniks are present in the game data and can be placed with debug mode. The Act 1 boss is present and you can fight it like normal. Act 2's layout is even less complete, and although there's no giant laser part of the boss fight, you can find a fully functioning hangmobile. Once again, there's no act transition. Ice Cap Zone's not too different, really. Again, the level layout is nearly identical to the final, it's just the object layout that's different. The main difference is again the music. Sonic starts the level by running down the mountain instead of the snowboarding sequence. It's extremely easy to go way too fast and outrun the camera or even clip through the ground. There's also no water in Act 2, even though the platforms still function normally without it. And the daytime palette is used for all the outdoor sections, it doesn't change for Act 2. And of course, the level transition doesn't work once again. Launch Base actually uses a different color palette with a pink sky and dark green Death Egg. This palette is also seen in the final game's save icon, which is kinda cool. I actually really like this aesthetic, even though I do understand why they changed it for the final version. After the Knuckles encounter in Act 1, the game doesn't allow you to continue, but you can use Tails to get up to the mini-boss, which has a weird gimmick where you can fall down a hole to get sent up above it. However, if you get hit into the tube, it counts as a death pit. The first boss at the end of Act 2 dies in one hit, probably for testing reasons. Knuckles is also standing on top of this weird thing instead of his usual platform, and after this Knuckles encounter, the level just sort of stops. The next boss is found within the game files, but Big Arm just straight up doesn't exist in this build. And unfortunately, that's all the actually playable levels. Despite being on the level select, Mushroom Valley and Sandopolis cannot be loaded, and they unfortunately lack a lot of important data. If you try to load into Mushroom Valley, you just die instantly. There's technically an object layout present, and an early version of the mini-boss in the game data. There's also some unused palette data from Mushroom Valley found within the game's code. Here's a recreation of what it might have looked like. Unfortunately, it's the same case for Sandopolis. It's basically identical to trying to access it on the final version of Sonic 3, just unplayable garbage data. There is an early version of the Act 1 boss in the game data which can be spawned through a little editing. Lava Reef is also one of those nothing stages that's super glitchy if you try to force load into it, but by some miracle there's actually a good amount of Lava Reef data from an earlier build buried at the end of the ROM for some reason. If the game is hacked to load this leftover data, then there's enough to basically restore a version of Act 1 that's almost complete, although it doesn't have any objects and it's missing collision data. The layout is slightly different, but the most noticeable difference is how the level uses a completely different palette from the final version. Lava doesn't hurt the player yet, and the death egg in the background looks different. There's also no boss at the end. Now onto the bonus stages. Unfortunately, none of them are complete. If you try to load into any of them, you just fall down and die. The Gumball one doesn't even have any defined spheres loaded into the capsule yet, they're all just gray. The Glowing Spheres game is similarly incomplete, but it does use a different wall graphic compared to the final game. The Slot Machine stage has the correct background, but it's not animated yet. The slot machine has basically been designed, it's just not functional yet. In the game data, you can actually find slightly different versions of the slot machine icons. They're actually a little more detailed than the final versions, which had to be changed due to palette limitations. These two special stages are very interesting. They're actually still just in the tech demo stage of development. The first one loads up this pre-rendered gray sphere surrounded by a bunch of rotating red spheres. This is actually that same object we saw all the way back in Angel Island 1's debug mode. You can control the movement of the spheres with the controllers, which is pretty cool. Special Stage 2 features a bunch of red spheres laid out in a grid formation, which forms a pseudo 3D effect that you can also mess around with using the controllers. It's pretty neat. Alright, I've officially run out of interesting things to say about Sonic 3, for now, so I'll stop wasting your time and just end the video here. I look forward to all the memes asking me about a Sonic 4 bonus video, which I promise you will never happen. Once again, I'd like to give a special thanks to these awesome people and websites. Check the description of this video for some links, and super special thanks to my wonderful patrons, who are these people, and also these people.